Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. On behalf of Attitude Change International, it's our pleasure to welcome the renowned environmentalist Dr. Chandramohan Seth, former chairman WWF India J&K, to interact on the eve of International or World Environment Day. So, most welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, before we go to the environment, I will request you, sir, to take us to your school days, your native place, and your journey of the IFS and your positions you served. So please, sir.
Okay. As you know that I belong to the state of Jammu and Kashmir and city of Jammu. City of Jammu is a beautiful place. It is located in a mountainous tract and on the right and left bank of river Tavi, popularly known as Suryaputri. And the only place which has on both sides the wildlife sanctuaries, which protects the environment of the Jammu city and always keeps it cool in spite of the fact that this tract falls in a very hot zone. Sometimes the temperature reaches up to 45 degrees, but still because of the presence of two national parks and a river flowing in between, always the climate of Jammu is very soothing. So I belong to this place, and basically I am a mountain man. You can call me. And this was one of the reasons, which attracted me to the forest service, because I thought that this is one service after completion of my post-graduation in Kashmir University in the field of botany and forest ecology. So I thought that this forest service is one of the best service where I can, satisfy my professional knowledge also. It gives me an opportunity to learn more about the nature and the environment, and also do a good service to the nation and the society by connecting the civil society with the environment. So in the year 1971, I joined the forest services in the state forest services, and soon after 1978, I was inducted into Indian Forest Services. So for about 38 years, I served the government of India. And in 2009, I superannuated, retired from the government service. And this was very challenging job, satisfying, and gave a lot of opportunity to move each and every place of my state. As you know that Jammu and Kashmir is located on the extreme end of Western Himalayas, and the only place which has three ecosystems. One is the high altitude, the Trans-Himalayas, the Ladakh area. And then the middle zone is Kashmir, which is very similar to the Mediterranean type of temperate climate. And lower into Shivaliks and outer Himalayas, it is a temperate and subtropical climate. So this is a very unique place where you have all the ecosystems. That's number one. Number two, because of Himalayas, we have a good number of the glaciers, and which feed one of the mega rivers of this subcontinent. And Indus, it flows through our area, and Indus has given us one of the very important, the civilizations, the Indus Valley civilizations. It was on the top of river Indus, the earliest civilization started, coming up. Then Dado and Harappa also, which gives the evidence that it was a very prosperous and flourishing civilizations. Then the river Jhelum is there, river Chenab is there, and it's called Chandrabhaga also. So they are the lifeline of this, the western part of the subcontinent, which sports many life systems, agriculture, horticulture, electricity, irrigation, drinking. So they are very important rivers. And interestingly, these rivers, they flow from our glaciers in Jammu and Kashmir. And besides that, we have some very good percentage of the forest areas. Some of the very good coniferous forests we have in Jammu and Kashmir. And among them is the Cedrus deodara is there, Abies pindro is there. Then we have a good percentage of oak forests. Oak forests are considered one of the reservoirs of the water. They are very good forests. So they play a great role in the recharging of the underground water and then releasing into the spring and the river system. So they play a great role. Similarly, down below, we have other broadleaf species. This sport not only the environment and ecology, but they support, over one of the biggest population, what we call them Gujars and Bakarwal, nomadic population. More than 70 lakh sheep, goat, and buffaloes, they, sustain on this
So nice, sir.
ecosystem.
So nice, sir. Actually,
Yes.
this year theme is time for the nature, means what type of infrastructure we should have, what type of action we should
Yeah.
have. So where we are and where we should go, sir, in terms of the environmental conservation, sir.
That's true. That's true. This year's theme is of the World Environment Day is the celebration of biodiversity and the time for nature. The time for nature, this COVID has given a very strong, the message to the population that if you don't learn, I have my own ways to teach you how to, maintain the environment. So it has given a very strong message. So on this World Environment Day, most of the international communities and World Health Organization, FAO and all, so they are, insisting that the human being, because of this, pandemic which has come through the world, and now, it has become very serious. More than 4 lakh, deaths has happened, and almost 70 to 80 lakh are the infections, and it's going to increase. But so this, what this whole, the infection is telling to the governments, policy planners, and the lawmakers and the civil society, that you cannot fiddle with the nature. If you fiddle with the nature, then nature has its own way to correct this, the global ecosystem. So this is a strong message which it has given. So now is the time when, the civil society, they should learn from their mistakes, and after learning their mistakes, they should take certain corrective measures at all levels, at the grassroots level, from village to the cities, from cities to the megapolis, and to the big countries, and from developing to developed countries. So all the governments, when they open up after these lockdowns, they should seriously think not of the economy as it is happening now. The most of the countries, due to their compulsions, they have started opening up, and they have taken a lot of risk to open the society because of economic considerations. But nowhere we have heard that they talked about the ecological considerations, which has created the whole situation. This was the time when most of the countries, they should have, through their constitutional processes, through their public interventions, through their media, they should have talked about the ecology, preservation of environment, and what the human beings should, are supposed to do in coming times, so that such type of pandemics, they don't happen. And I tell you, one of the interesting things, the first World Environment Day happened when there was a Stockholm conference in 1972. So in that, on the human environment, it was decided that we should seriously think about the human population, its sustainability, and the sustainability of the environment. And the population at that point of time, when this, the crisis was felt, it was only 4 billion in the world. And after the first conference, there were other conferences also, like Rio conferences were there. Then there were climate change conferences were there, global warming conferences were there, and then the COPs were formed. the COPs, conference of parties, where the decisions are taken. Then to have a sustainable this earth. Then they started thinking of Millennium Development Goals. Then after that, now we are passing through the Sustainable Development Goals. They are about 17 goals, which addresses almost every issue from human issue to the environmental issue. That how a sustainable society can be made, but how it can be sustained. That's very interesting. That between first World Environment Day and this year's Environmental Day, there is an increase, double, almost a double increase from 4 to 8 billion population. Then population is increasing. If the population increases, the demands will increase, requirements will increase. Spaces, more spaces will be required for the cities. Infrastructure has to develop. Industry has to be developed to meet their requirements. And if all this happens, again, the environment cannot be protected. So this is one issue. Which no government is addressing. The government has to address that. What is the sustainable level of population on this earth? Whether it is 4 billion, whether it is 8 billion, or in coming years 10 billion, then can it be sustained? And if it cannot be sustained, all the ecological support system of this earth, they will they will fail. And once they will fail, this the whole ecological chain, where there is ecological balance, that will get disturbed. And most of the infections, most of the disasters, the natural disaster and other man-made disasters, that will happen on this earth, and there will be a total disaster of the humanity on this earth. So this is the time that right from the government up to the grass level and the civil society, they should seriously think not only the economic considerations, but also of the ecological consideration, if they want to have a sustainable, happy and prosperous life on this earth.
Sir, for this COVID-19 pandemic, what we see and what we hear nowadays, what experts are saying, that climate that has changed in the positive direction. For example, we can see in our Jammu, the temperature is much lower as compared to the previous years. And internationally, we can see ozone layer, which was depleted, now that is also being restored by the, we can say, reduction the pollution. So what do you say, sir?
True. In my earlier interviews also, many people asked me this question, that how the environment will improve, and what they have experienced in the last 3 months. As you rightly said, that the ozone layer depletion reduced, then the temperature in many cities, and interestingly, the pollution index in most of the highly polluted cities like Delhi, like Kolkata, like Bombay, and in other countries also, that came down. In India, where the pollution index has already crossed 400, 500 also. And in most of the cities, it was more than 200, which was, from severe to very dangerous. But, the record shows that in some of the cities, it has come below 50. And below 50 is a very good, air quality. So this has happened in 3 months. And how it happened? Because there was complete lockdown. There was no movement, no industries, no industrial smoke was there, no, infrastructure development, road construction was not there, railway constructions were not there. Traffic. Then the transport. Most of the increase in temperature and the air pollution happens with the transport smoke also. So that was also stopped. So everything was stopped. So that's why the nature, got a rest. What we call that they got a 3 months rest to again revive its quality in all aspects: air, water, earth, soil, biodiversity. So it got a rest. And interestingly, the species, the wildlife species, and they felt it. They clearly got a message that something has happened in the nature, and they started reclaiming their habitats which were lost to the human population. So they started coming to the streets, they started coming to the city parks. So this is how, and this is what I say, this was the message which, the civil society should have learned, to give enough space to the wildlife and to take certain measures where there is less smoke, released to the atmosphere, less dust. So this was felt. But, what will happen in future? This is what I tell to, to the most of the people, that the human being has a very short memory. it has a short memory. It feels only 5 movements. If something, disastrous happens or any event happens, then it forgets, and then it starts doing the same thing which he has been doing earlier, because he doesn't keep these events in his memory. He says that was a past. Now let me think for the future, what I have to do. Then he starts, doing the same activities and same transport, same, coming to the streets, crowding. You have seen, when this lockdown opened, and there was a huge rush. Then, particularly a country like India, you saw the situation of this migrant labor. Migrant labor did not follow any of the guidelines of the government of India. So the result was that there was a big spike in India, where there was a control in the infectious cases. And so in future, what I feel, the same thing will happen which was happening 3 months earlier. So the governments have not learned the lesson. This is what I'm insisting. The population has not learned the lesson. And if they have not learned, and if they repeat the same mistakes which they have been doing earlier, so we will be what we call the back to the square one, that we'll do the same activities, and there will be increase in pollution in cities also, on the roads also, villages, towns, everywhere. There will be same increase in temperature, because 3 months was a very little period. So what was happening, what we were facing about the environmental quality in the last 70 years after the Industrial Revolution, and particularly in the last 100 years, there has been no control on population, no control on habitat reclamation, no control on biodiversity conservation, no control on global warming. So that was happening. Again, because of economic compulsions, most of the governments, most of the civil society, they have started doing the same thing which they were doing earlier. So this is what I feel.
So nice, sir. And sir, now I'll take you to WWF. You have served as the chairman of the WWF India J&K, and that was a really exemplary and outstanding period, both for Jammu and Kashmir and WWF India. And you have involved so many students from the different schools, colleges, and universities in the environmental campaign. So, what was your experience? And now, after that, that work was stopped or not visible to society, sir? Please, sir.
So, for everything, there is a particular period for that, you have to do, and everything is evolving in the process. So you're right. I took an initiative and started this Worldwide Fund for Nature India in Jammu and Kashmir, because this was one of the states which was in Himalayas, both starting from east to west Himalayas, and because India is a mega diversity area, and J&K in particular, and some of the areas are hotspots also. So I thought that this is one area where I should, take a lead and start this WWF India chapter in Jammu and Kashmir. The whole idea was that this was an international organization. So they have got international experience. So I thought, why not bring the international experience to our, the local intellectuals, the local civil society, and start, learning from their international experience and do certain action programs in Jammu and Kashmir. So right from the first day, we started, that was the first, activity we started here. We used to call them as a nature clubs for generating awareness in the youth. So about 100 schools were, they were chipped in, and we started nature clubs. Then later on, the same experience, helped us, and we were given a recognition by Government of India. So they gave us a National Green Corps program in J&K state. Under National Green Corps program of the Ministry of Environment, we registered about 5,500 schools, both primary and the higher school. Then another program came up, and that was another very good program. I used to call that as a Facebook program of Government of India, National Environment Awareness Campaign. So that was thematic program where we included even the degree colleges and the 10+2 schools also. And under the NGC, we covered the primary and the middle schools. And for higher, we took up this NEAC program. Then another third program came up. It came through the Center of Environmental Education. It is based in Ahmedabad. It is a recognized organization for the environmental programs by the United Nations. And their very famous program, which was launched by our former President Marnia Abdul Kalam ji, and that was called Handprint Program. So that handprint program was such a great success, where we covered more than almost every school in Jammu and Kashmir state. So starting from 100 schools, and we now covered all the schools. And we are, for 10 years, more than 10 years, and this program, it comprised of two parts. One was awareness in the form of seminars, in the form of conferences, in the form of poster displays, in the form of rallies. So a lot of awareness was generated throughout nook and corner of the J&K state. And the second part was an action program. Under action program, we used to tell to the school, and interestingly, for running these eco schools, we established a network of eco teachers, eco club teachers. So now we have a very good cadre and very good environmentalists because of that, 10 years experience and what we call the eco club teachers. And they have become our environmental ambassadors in the society also, and in the schools and colleges also. So we are now very much satisfied. And not only that, after we launched this program, we insisted the state government to start environmental subject in the school and colleges. And they agreed to our, suggestion, and this environmental subject was recognized. And now most of the, school and colleges and degree colleges, even the professional colleges, even B.Ed colleges, they have the environmental teacher, and they are trained, in our program of this, the nature clubs and Paryavaran Mitra programs, and then the action programs where we gave them different themes like water conservation, like agriculture, horticulture, biodiversity conservation. And the last, very good exercise which we had started at that point of time under this program, that was People's Biodiversity Register, where, the school, under the guidance of school teachers, the students were supposed to go to their, rural areas or the surrounding areas and document the biodiversity of the area. That was very interesting. It was both documentation and the learning process. So that was a wonderful exercise. And later on, which was adopted under the Biodiversity Act. Now, under the Biodiversity Act, this People Diversity Registers is one of the major components. And I am very happy the government of India and the government of Jammu and Kashmir, they have adopted that recommendation, and they have put the panchayats for the People Biodiversity Registers, and they will be guided by the local, the experts, how to document. And once that is done, then we will have the National Biodiversity Register. So the benefit of National Biodiversity Register is that we will be documenting all the animal and plant species. Not only that, the indigenous knowledge also, indigenous skills also, indigenous craftsmen, heritage also, everything in one register, National Biodiversity Register. That will protect us from the piracy of knowledge. That will protect us from the piracy of these species which is happening here, and help us in protecting the biodiversity and the traditional knowledge also of the India. So there will be no piracy. We will have our own patent for all these kind of things. We will have the copyrights also for all these things. So that will ultimately help the country also and the society also. So this is what we did in the WWF of India. So after completing all these things, that we thought now is the stage that we have done our job. So let the people, the environmental ambassadors, those who are in the education department or in the NGOs, to whom we have trained most of the NGOs, let them take up. And now this was the second phase. The first phase was over. That was the launching pad and training. You will be surprised to know that in that period, when we started these three schemes, we also had a program of teacher training program. So more than about 800 schools in all the three regions, we trained the teacher in every zone, at least 50 teachers. So that is another group, they are very active in this environmental conservation in their areas, and they are following all those, whatever we have trained. So that is now helping the society. And what I would say, that 10 years experience and our 10 years work has helped the society to become environmental aware, and they know what is to be done and what is not, what is good and what is bad. So now this second stage is now helping them. They have taken up, and I'm very happy. Professors like you and professors like others, they have taken a lot of initiative. And today I'm speaking with your NGO also on this webinar, and this is the evolving stage. And we have never thought that this stage we will lead, and we will be giving our interview on the webinar, and the people will be listening. So I'm very glad. And for the schools, you know, the government of Jammu and Kashmir, they have already started Green Schools program, and I understand that, learned from somebody that one of the senior officers has put as a nodal officer who is looking after herbal gardens in the school and colleges. And in that time also, we established botanical gardens, mini botanical gardens, the herbal gardens, and plantations in school and colleges. So a lot of work was done in Jammu and Kashmir in all aspects of the environment.
Yes, sir. But actually, sir, the pace, what I see, when you are chairman and now, it is quite, we can say, different. We could not keep that pace intact. So what are the proper reasons, sir?
That's true. That's true. Look, that's the role of NGO. That's the NGO. Look, that was reason we brought you, because NGO to there you have a lot of expertise, and you are free to bring the expertise from the stakeholders. So that is it. But in the government system, there you work government rules and regulations. So they have their own, you know, protocols. But in NGO, that the protocols are entirely different. They are free to work anywhere. So that gives a lot of leverage, and you can go to any part of the society, any part of the land, and you can conduct the program. So that is because that is the typical role of the NGO. The NGO has to be there if you have to take up any program on the mission mode. And we took up that program on the mission mode, and we were very focused. We had no other work, like, you know, in the government department. If a teacher is there in the school, he's supposed to work in the election duty. He's supposed to work now in the covert duty, in the containment zone. So they have a lot. So it's very difficult to focus on a particular thing. But in the NGO mode, you have only a single objective. So you can address the problem and find out the solutions in a very focused manner. So that's why you felt at that point of time the impact of this whole program, and that was talked everywhere, in every society, government corridors, and in media also. And it was very well recognized, and very glad that our work was recognized. I was not interested that I should be recognized, but I'm more satisfied that our work is recognized. That's why you speak the WWF, the organization. Organization is more important. The teamwork is more important. And we had the people like you, those who were helping us at that point of time. And we took this program to the, you know, greater heights, and achieved many milestones also. You are already aware that what milestones we achieved at that point of time. And that's why you don't find, I thought that the government will, like the, you know, the WWF, in a mission mode, they will take up this program and take it forward, because now the subject is in the school and colleges, the teachers are teaching, and the government is aware. But as you rightly pointed out, there is no organization to push these programs in the government organization, so that every time they are reminded that this is more important. As in the very beginning I said, the government always thinks of development and the economics. They don't think of the ecology. And there has to be some organization which compels them to think, no, you have to start from ecology, then go to the development, then go to the economics. So that balance has to be built. So once we stopped that WWF, so that missing link is definitely there. So this is I hope and I wish that some volunteers, they come forward and create an institution like WWF in J&K, which is exclusively for the Jammu and Kashmir, and they address the environmental issues of Jammu and Kashmir, both in awareness, action, and then the advocacy is very important. we require very good advocates and those who can plead. And I'm very happy to know that some of the students, those who were our eco club, students, and they did law, and now they have taken up environmental law in their hands, and they have become very good advocates in the high court, in the lower courts also, and they are taking up as a PIL many cases, like Dal cases, like Sonmarg cases. I would like to mention the name of Nadeem. Nadeem has become one of the excellent this environmental
advocates.
Yes, advocates. And similarly in Jammu also there are 2-3 advocates. They have taken up like Grana wetland, like river Tavi. So they have gone to the court also. And the interesting part is that the most of the high court judges, they have become environmentalists. The many things which are not happening in the government, the judges are giving the orders the government to implement, whether it is a solid waste management or it is pollution abatement, air pollution, water pollution, whatever the issues are there. Sometimes suo moto they take the cases and they issue the directions. So that is a very positive indication. But you are right, as you said, that we require a very strong, organization in the civil society, which could take up programs and is always after the government and after these, particularly the panchayat. Now that we have the panchayat raj system also, and then the municipalities also, what they are supposed to do, and try to make them aware about the environmental laws, rules, regulations. Not only that, and also tell them certain solutions, what they can do, how they can, improve the environment.
So nice, sir. Actually, environment has a primary position in every religion. And yeah, so what do you would say to the religious people, how they can promote the environment and how they can help to conserve the environment?
Very interesting question. Very interesting. I tell you, our ancient civilizations, they never left the environment out of their the whole philosophy. The whole philosophy religion is based on the nature only. You see the scriptures in India, starting from Vedas. The Vedas, the very first line, it starts from the 5 elements of nature: air, water, energy, fire. And they believe that the creation of the human being is also based on these 5 elements of the nature. And when a person dies, all the 5 elements, they again go into the nature. So this is a very good example of the recycling in nature. Whatever you create, it goes back to the nature also. So then in the Indian, the old scriptures and old systems and philosophies, what they have done, they have brought this biodiversity very close to the human being. The examples, typical examples I'll give you: the growing of tulsi in every household. Tulsi is a panacea. It's a very good medicinal plant. But they connected it to the religion, that you grow in your house and you will be fine. But that was their way of teaching nature and bringing nature to very close to the society. Then they said that you worship the banyan tree, you worship the ficus tree, and similarly you worship certain rivers also, you worship certain mountains. Then they started, these annual pilgrimages, like, the people go to those bigger lakes in Tibet, this Mansarovar, then you have Kaplash, then you have Kausara. So what was the whole idea? Whole idea is that take the people to certain places and tell them they are very important elements for your survivability. And every year, because every year new generation comes, so there was a regular ritual of the melas, then these yatras and everything. So this is a very good example how the ancient people, ancient sages, and they thought that how we can bring nature very close to a human being. If we do not bring this nature to the close to the human being, they will start destroying, and it will be a they will put X on their feet, and this humanity will get vanished. So this is a strong message in our Indian civilization. Similarly, in other civilizations also. I had gone to Middle East and countries like Egypt and Turkey and Israel and Greece also. And what I found interestingly, particularly if you go to the Egypt, the crocodiles, the falcons, and most of the sun god, the river god, and they have made a part of their daily life. If you enter, those ancient temples in Egypt, at the very, outside, you have two falcons, and at the head of the door, you have the snakes there. So this indicates that those ancient people, they brought this nature very close to the ruling class also, and to the civil population, that you don't forget, don't damage them, because they are part and parcel of your daily life. So this is how, the ancient civilization, religions also. I give an example from the Islamic books also. Some of the disciples of Prophet Muhammad, they went to him. They said that in the desert, we are finding it difficult to get a water. And from where to get a water? You are a prophet, you tell us. The Prophet Muhammad tells to the disciples, look, open your eyes and ears. You go to the back to the deserts, and you will find the answer. You will find the answer from the nature. And when they went back, what they found interestingly, I'll tell you, there is a very interesting story. Some of the deers, early in the morning, they come from all where. And on the rocks, they start licking. And after licking, sometime they go back. When those disciples, they went to the rocks, what they found interestingly, there was, the plants, you are already there, the lichens were growing on those rocks. And lichens, they are hygroscopic. From the atmosphere, they absorb the water. See the knowledge of Prophet Muhammad. This is the knowledge. And he knew that these plants, they absorb the water. And that water, once they are absorbed, the deers, they know it. And as a routine, they come to the masses in the morning, because during daytime, they will get dry. Early in the morning, and they take the water. Then the Prophet tells that, like the deer, you also go there and you take the water. Whenever you require, at this point of time, you take the masses, put that in the hand, squeeze them, and you get a lot of water. So this is how the religion brings this, nature very close to the human being. In fact, the basic concept of our religion is to put the human soul in the natural environment. And that human soul gets purified, and once that's get purified in the nature, it gets a very good opportunity to meet its Almighty, the God, and that is the ultimate. And that is the lesson of our religions in that. Whether that is a Buddhist religion, there also, you see, the Buddhist, the Gautam Buddha got his enlightenment under a tree, and that also banyan tree, which is considered, it gives oxygen, in the daytime and in the night time also. So the most of the places, you find any of the religion, the message is very clear that don't forget the nature. Nature is very close to you. Sorry. And taking the teachings of these, the holy people, the saints, the Prophet Muhammad, Gautam Buddha, Guru Nanak. Look, Guru Nanak has written such a beautiful, these poems in every season. And he has so beautifully described every season, whether it is spring, winter, and he has connected this, the autumn season with the human being. That like an autumn season in everybody's life, this time comes, which is just like a autumn. And again after autumn, again in the spring, it gets rejuvenated and a new life, starts. So there are very strong messages. Where you read any book, in every book, there's only one common thing, that nature is very important. Yeah. And nature is very important. And even some of the scientists, even like Einstein never believed in God. Then, in the last days of his life, he said, no, I believe that nature is God and God is nature. This is what he said.
Exactly. Even in Christianity, we can say Christmas trees, that means how the trees are important.
Yes. Yeah. Important. So it's celebrated. So religion never says that you are outside the nature. Nature is a part and parcel of the human being. And a human being is not the master of the nature. That is another message.
Yeah.
The message in early ages is that you are not the master of nature. You are a part of the nature, and you have a great responsibility to protect it, and you take care of the nature. This is the responsibility is given, that you take care of nature. Uh, by taking care of nature, you can use it for your, survivability, your livelihood, but you don't destroy it. Take only that much, which Mahatma Gandhi has said, take only that much which is required. If you start taking much more which is not required, then you start, destroying this whole system.
So nice, sir. Actually, you have traveled several countries, and what experience from abroad you have brought to India, and what experience from India you have brought taken to abroad?
Another very interesting. From India, I took the values of ancient civilization to these countries. Our country is a big diverse country, both in biodiversity and human diversity, language diversity, cultural diversity. So how we live, in this diverse situation and coexist with each other, this was a very strong, and our value system, our cultural, our rich culture. So that that was, the good thing which I, took to all these countries, and I shared my knowledge with them. Then I shared with them, once I visited those places, I found many commonalities, that there's no difference between the Arabian culture, between the Egyptian culture, Turkish culture. One thing is that all these civilizations, they grew together. And they have the commonality in their thought process, commonality in their philosophy, commonality in their scientific knowledge, commonality in their development. So that is the connecting link between all these civilizations. The earliest civilizations, whether it is a Persian, Indian, the Egyptian civilization, Arabian civilization, Turkish civilization, Greek civilization. Interestingly, Socrates and Chanakya, they were, they developed their, philosophy of economics and political science at the same time. He was in Greece and he was in Takshashila. So great connectivity between all these civilizations. So all these civilizations, they got their opportunities to learn from each other, right, from the earlier times, and they had the trade routes, and trade routes were the knowledge routes also. I mean, that is one of the things which never, discussed or had a narrative in the intellectual fora, that they were the knowledge routes also. The knowledge was, being exchanged between one country to another country, and this is how now we are at the stage that all the countries, they share those knowledge, and they have developed their scientific and technology to the greater extremes. And this is one thing. And from those countries, learned many things, particularly in Israel. What I saw in Israel, it is a zero waste country. Zero waste, and how they have managed. And you know that Israel almost falls in a desert zone, and there's acute water shortage. And what they have done, they don't waste water like we have here in India, because there's still we feel that there's plenty of water. Our sewerage system, it goes into the rivers, underground water, that is polluted, that is getting depleted. Similarly, air is being polluted. So in the air, they don't release the toxic gases. They have all their technological advancements. Then the water, that is what I'm taking. All the dirty water from the villages, from the metropolitan cities, from the towns. What they do, they collect through the sewerage system down below into the valleys and make big ponds. In the big ponds, they clean it, that water through biological process also, through chemical process also. Again, that water is recycled for the irrigation, because for irrigation they don't have sufficient water. That water is used in the irrigation also. That water used in the fishery development also. That water used in getting the aquatic vegetation also, the food also from those water also, and it is used in the workshops also. So that water is used in those process. The clean water is not used. Clean water is very scarce there. So this is some of the things I learned. Then their, the agriculture and horticulture, they have developed such a advanced technology that they have reclaimed their, the deserts also. And in the deserts, they grow all the plants and all the species, particularly the sprinkler irrigation, underground irrigation. So all these concepts, in Israel is one example where you can, learn from the sustainable model of, the ecology and the economy, and how they, each and every element which is, required by the human being or their, citizen, they manage it in such a way that they don't have anything, their air quality is good, their water quality is good, zero waste. And that model, in some of the countries they are adopting. In India, we are adopting their agriculture methods also, we are adopting their irrigation methods also, but not to the large extent. So we have to learn many things from these countries. Similarly, in Egypt also, Egypt is one place where most of the agriculture happens on the right and left bank of River Nile. Again, there, the water in the desert, it is a saline, so they cannot irrigate. So they also adopted, the model of Israel also, and they are going for the irrigation through this sprinkler irrigation, extending their areas in agriculture also. And but one thing in Egypt, I have not seen, they are doing much work in the afforestation. They have to do, like in India, we plant millions of trees, both in the villages also, we have the habit of, planting these trees, and then in the government also. There, I interacted with some of these experts also, and government functionaries. So they don't have such a big program of the plantations, big plantations, wherever it is required. And I think if they start these plantations with the, the kind of species they have, and most of their vegetation is either in Alexandria, that delta, River Nile delta, or at the starting point from where the River Nile starts, that is in somewhere between Sudan and Egypt. So not much of the vegetation, but to have a more vegetation, they should go for this thing. And same is in the Middle East also. In Turkey is very conscious about the environment. That's what I have seen. They are very, they have very good rules and regulations. Enforcement is very good there in Turkey. Their streets are very clean. Their hotel restaurants are clean. Restaurants are as clean as your drawing room. That's what I found. And similarly, there are religious places like Blue Mosque. In the Blue Mosque, you go. It is so neat and clean. You get a spiritual satisfaction by entering that, Blue Mosque there, one of the biggest mosques also. And similarly, most of their coastal area, horticulture is highly developed in Turkey. One of the best, your apples, plums, peach, your mulberry. So all these things, they come. And same is in the Greece also. In Greek also, people are very conscious about their, the plantations, the species, and the beautification of the landscapes. Although the climate is very good, Mediterranean for growing trees, but in these, desertic countries, starting from Egypt, Sudan, and these Middle East countries, the way they also have to do. Interestingly, in Dubai, there, the governments, they are taking steps wherever they are creating artificial water bodies, and in around water bodies, they have made them amusement parks also, and they are growing trees. One of the best botanical gardens now next to Singapore, I think it is in Dubai. It's beautiful, and how they are growing those flowers and trees, that's quite amazing. So that is being adopted. So this is what we learn from these countries also. There are lessons from these countries, and there are many things from India for those countries, and they are already, with the governments, they are exchanging with the departments and with the experts. They exchange their ideas, technologies, and both all these countries, they developing with the experience of each other country. And
so nice, sir. And coming back to our own India, we have a diversity in almost all the respects. And how do we compare Jammu and Kashmir with the other states in terms of the biodiversity and environmental conservation? And what is the which is the best state across the nation in terms of environmental conservation? and that we should apply in Jammu and Kashmir or elsewhere? Which is the best one in your opinion?
Yeah, I think many experts are aware these days. The international organizations, they have a rating system for the environment system. They have the rating system for the clean cities. They have the rating system for smart cities. They have the rating system for this, best tourism states. They have the rating for best these, environmental states also, ecological states also, then ecotourism states. So there's a rating system also. And based on those ratings, in international national rating, as far the India is concerned, and I think many people now these days, they know that Sikkim is one of the best states. Sikkim is the state where they have not discovered their, yes, biodiversity and the environment, and they have typically followed the example and which other states should follow, the carrying capacity. They have that our state is rich in biodiversity. We will not allow, the rush of tourists, rush of the public. So they strictly go as per the carrying capacity. So they have put the number. How many tourists can visit those countries? And not only that, they have followed the traditional system of conserving water, traditional system of conserving their forests, traditional system of conserving wildlife, traditional system of doing agriculture. So everywhere they are following the traditional system plus the new technology. So both things they do. Whether Sikkim is one of the best examples. Then after that you come to the Northeast also. In the Northeast also there is a good example of the conservation also. And then some of the southern states, they're also doing good, but there's a lot of the central and southern states, eastern and western Ghats, a lot of pressure of the population. You have seen that almost 1 to 2 crore of migrant populations, it goes to these places, and they create a lot of problems in those cities and rural areas. But still, they have their policies and their plans to conserve their biodiversity. Like Western Ghats is already the preserved area and the UNESCO heritage area, and similarly the Silent Valley, one of the best biodiversity rich area. And coming back to the Himalayas, in Uttarakhand also you have the Nanda Devi National Park, so well protected. In Himachal you have the Himalayan National Park, and to our this the home state, this union territory, the Jammu and Kashmir, this, as I told you, it's very rich as far the wildlife population is concerned. I think the only area in India and in the world also where you have the maximum number of wild ungulates. Wild ungulates we have. Then we have the snow leopard also. So all these very important flagship species in our state. Our this hangul is there, markhor is there. So they are very important species from the biodiversity point of view. To preserve them, the Jammu Kashmir also has many national park, wildlife sanctuaries, wetlands, more than 6 to 7 lakh migratory birds every winter. They come to Jammu and Kashmir as a staging ground also and breeding ground also, like Hokersar, like Wuller, like your other Haigam. And similarly, Grana wetland in Jammu is very important where bar-headed geese comes every time. So all these are the protected area, but there's much more is to be done in the area of environment and ecology preservation. We fail on, I'll say, the attempts are being made, but we fail on many occasions. That is the water pollution. Most of the rivers are highly polluted. They pass through the urban areas like Jhelum is highly polluted. River Tavi is polluted. Chenab water is relatively better because it doesn't pass through the thickly populated area in our areas, but in our adjoining country, it again passes through highly polluted, and there it is the pollution increases. Similarly, our forest area, we are quite rich in our forest area, but it is getting depleted slowly and slowly due to extension in the urban areas, because now we have the projects like smart cities, we have the projects like mega cities also, like Jammu, once it had only about 40 or 50 square kilometer area. Now the master plan says that it has extended to 600 square kilometers. Same is in Srinagar also. So they, what will happen? They will eat agricultural land, they will eat forest land, they will eat wetland. So this is a situation will be created. They have to make certain models where they don't disturb the real ecology of the area, so that the population which is coming up in coming years, their life is very healthy, and they live peacefully. Otherwise, there will be crisis. Natural disasters has to be there. The cyclones has to be there. Global warming has to be there. So in Jammu and Kashmir, we have to take many more measures. For the solid waste management is a big problem in our state. We have failed to create where we can recycle our solid waste, municipal waste in both the cities and other towns also. Every time the High Court comes with some directions and the public is concerned about it. Then traffic infrastructure has not developed. Still, the number of vehicles has increased, but the number of roads, their width, their parking places, that has not developed. So you get a lot of crowding, and once the crowding and the traffic jams are there, there will be more smoke and more increase in temperature and the pollution in the environment. That is another where the government has to think of. And then for protection of these forests, they have to come up with very big programs. And all the degraded areas which we have in Jammu and Kashmir, they have to be reclaimed and replanted with these indigenous species. Where the conifers have been depleted, we have to plant the conifers. And where the broadleaf species have depleted, we have to plant with the broadleaf species. And that's going to help not only our J&K state, but whole of the subcontinent, both in the area of climate, in the area of water conservation. So and in the area of supplying of ecological services like agriculture services. Most of the herbal species in this country, they come from this union territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh also now. And they need to be preserved, the herbal, the medicinal. And in the COVID also, you have seen recently that to improve the immunity, they are only these the herbal plants, and they described some kadas and some kind of recipes which we can take to improve our the immunity system. And traditionally also we had a system. I had recently written one small paper in the Daily Excelsior, the traditional use of daatan, the toothbrush. So what was the concept of toothbrush? Because most of the species, you think of walnut, you think of kicker, you think of fly, they produce the tannins, and tannins are very good to kill virus and bacteria in the mouth. So this is what I said. So this the J&K state, not only there, this was one of the example, and there's so many herbal medicines they are made. Hello.
So nice, so nice.
Hello. So I think my battery is going to be consumed. I think
okay, sir. Lastly,
this is the last message.
Sir. Yeah, sir. Your message for the youth and students, lastly, yeah, of course, sir.
Yes, to the future generation, my message is that we should learn. That's what has happened because of pandemic and because of COVID. That nature is very wise, and if you take not the corrective measures at this time, the nature will have its own ways to take the corrective measures in a different ways, which is happening now throughout the world, like wildfires, like tsunamis, like this pandemics. So we have to be very careful and responsible citizens, and take all the best measures by which we can conserve the environment and the biodiversity. That is the message which I can say. And they should develop the habit of washing hands, the distancing at this point, and then planting of trees. Planting of trees is very important from every point of view, because this is the only factory which protects the environment.
Thank you, Dr. CM Seth Saab, for sparing your invaluable time to inspire youth and students and masses in general. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.